What is happening, post shifters? Welcome back to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. I'm looking for. Well, I always say that I'm looking forward to every guest that I have on the show. I'm hoping that you're enjoying the episodes now that I'm back. New Year's took a couple of months off and just relaxed a little bit. I'm doing my usual Facebooky sort of like unlocky thing that I do in my intros. That's why I'm always sort of distracted. But I'm really looking forward to this conversation because Naren Young was, for me, growing up in Australia and starting in the industry when I was about 17, 18 years old. Naren Young was definitely one of those people who inspired a lot of bartenders in Australia. So to see where he's come from and gone in the last like 10 years, well, I shouldn't say 20 years, but the last 15 to 20 years has been insane because I'm celebrating my 22nd year in the industry today. So all the way from Miami, he is the creative director of Sweet Liberty in Miami. Mr. Naren Young, how are you, sir?
Hey, buddy, I'm good. How you doing?
Good. I hope that intro was good. It was good for you. I still, I'm not sure about you, but I'm still that 26-year-old kid who moved to Canada from Australia years ago, and I still fanboy out pretty hard on people who inspire me. Because I think we both started in a generation or an era where the internet wasn't a big thing. So your Australian Bartender Magazine and stuff like that. Literally, I learned how to cost cocktails and how to cost spirits from Australian Bartender Magazine,
Right.
because you couldn't just go and Google it or go on your smartphone and get a automatic spreadsheet or an automatic like formula. You had to really read everything.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't a lot of resources available to us, kind of at that time, so there was a lot of trial and error and a lot of people just calling up their mates and going, "What are you doing?" And,
Yeah.
And hoping people would be kind of, willing to kind of share that information, in an industry that's fairly competitive. So, so having those outlets definitely, helps make a difference. But, thank you for the kind intro. It's, it's always nice, it's nice to be appreciated. And I'm also very grateful for a lot of people that have helped inspire me too, which we'll probably talk about today as well, I guess.
Yeah. Do you find Australia, like I try and tell people Australia, like we're competitive, but we're all also mates. Like this sort of this two sides of the coin. Like we'll be best friends at the end of the shift, but during service or venue to venue, you're like, oh no, I need to make sure that I'm better than them, doing something better than they were. But you're still best mates at the same time. You still share all the information and not change it all up.
Yeah, I think Australia's been fairly unique in that way that, I always found from the beginning the kind of bar scene was very inclusive and, there was definitely a kind of a collective camaraderie, around, in each city, so while they were competitive, yeah, you're right. I think that there was definitely a nice, kind of kinship, I guess, amongst the different bars. And I think that's really important. And it's kind of refreshing too, to know that, there's other people around that city that have got your back, if you need it, So I found that that was a really nice thing, I think, to be proud of. Not just myself, but anyone working in the Australian bar scene. I think it's an important lesson, I think, to take forward in whatever city you're in, because I think the more that bars kind of band together, I think it just makes the whole industry in that city stronger.
Especially over the last 2 years.
Well,
So how'd you get in the game? Like I always like to start with an origin story. I'm a massive comic book nerd. How did you get to the game?
Well, I mean, I've kind of said this story a lot, and it's a very interesting, progression, beginning in the industry. To be honest, to be frank, I saw that movie Cocktail, and I just thought that looks kind of fun and kind of interesting, and so my mum would actually just have like friends over for drinks and stuff, and I just started like pottering around at home with like just making drinks, and she would buy me all these kind of like cocktail books, not the good ones that we probably have kind of been geeking out over the last kind of decade. I mean, more so like, like Women's Weekly and like, housewives kind of cocktail books and things like that were very kind of basic, and didn't really go into any history or anything. And, so I just started tinkering around with those, and most of those drinks were probably pretty terrible. But I think what it did do was kind of gave me a real kind of appreciation for the academic side of the industry from an early age. So I was reading a lot, or what I could get my hands on anyway. Just seeing books at book fairs and just go, hey, that's a book about drinks or cocktails. I'll just pick it up and just see what it is. So I kind of developed this passion early on, I guess, for recipes and so forth. So by the time I could legally work in a bar, which was 18 in Australia, I probably knew about 100 or 200 cocktails in my head, but I hadn't really made most of them. I just kind of knew them. So I was this kind of like nerd early on, but I hadn't really put it into practice. So when I could finally, I guess, go out into the world and, start applying for jobs. I had that base there, but obviously there's a lot more work to do than that, just knowing recipes. So it gave me a good foundation. Let me just say that, so when I went into these bars, I had a little bit more confidence than probably maybe I would have if I was just starting from completely scratch.
Mm-hmm. Did it waver? Like, were you good at school? Were you like aiming to go to university or anything like that, like out of high school? Or was it like really just a one focus of like, okay, this is what I really want to do and check out and explore before I change my mind?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think the only thing I was really good at school was more like English and writing, so I think that progression into that world was probably the easiest one for me, because I was never good at like the mathematics side of things or science or anything like that. So I guess I had an interest in writing, and I was fairly creative in that way. So I went to university for a couple of years studying journalism, and then I kind of started getting some work as a freelance journalist. It's very basic stuff. So I kind of figured to myself, you know what, I didn't feel like I was learning that much in the course that I was in. And in that world, once you start getting published, it's actually much more useful than actually having the degree itself. So I just I dropped out my last year and just went, you know what, I'm just going to see where this goes. And yeah, I just started getting a bit more work. And then a friend of a friend kind of came to me and said, listen, I'm starting this magazine for bartenders. What do you think? And I was like, I don't know. Sure, sounds okay. Sounds fine. I didn't really, know much about it at the time. I was bartending, but I was kind of like, it was the early days of my career. The earlier days of my career, I guess. I first started working in restaurants when I was about 14. I was just like cleaning restaurants and stuff at an Italian restaurant in Sydney, and then didn't really start working in bars till I was around 18 or so. But so I've been in the industry for about 30 years now, if you include that kind of very basic menial, washing up and that kind of stuff, which is, always a good foundation for anyone, I think. But, fast forward to this magazine, he was like, by the end of the conversation, he's like, I think I want you to be the editor. And I was like, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I've just started writing. I've never edited a magazine before in my life. I was way over my head. I was like, surely there's got to be somewhere else. So ended up doing it, and just kind of, his advice was, we'll just figure it out as we go. That's Dave Stanton, who's still the owner of that magazine, and still friends to this day. And that magazine is still kicking along and doing great. So yeah, that was my, I guess, early academia, in the industry.
Don't bother doing the course. Just go and do some freelance work until you get offered an editor's position.
Yeah, it was just odd, and I just felt really like, what am I doing? Like it wasn't that I wasn't enjoying it, but I guess I was scared. I was just like, shit, I don't know what the hell's going on here, and how to edit a magazine. And Dave had a couple of other magazines that didn't do so well. There was one, I think, about for restaurateurs, and he just felt like that there was no voice, I guess, for bartenders, which he was right. And I think that what this magazine did, and I really do believe that it really helped lift the Australian bar industry, because it kind of brought a lot of people together. It allowed people to communicate. It brought in the bar awards. It really kind of let people think that this could be a viable career.
What year was that? It was like 95, 96, wasn't it?
No, we launched in 99.
Mm.
Yeah. But we probably started working on it in, late 98. And at that time I'd probably been bartending or, working in bars for about 2-3 years, and not necessarily been in good bars, but just progressively working my way up.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, 1999 anywhere was like, cocktail scene wise, was just in its fledgling state, and even like New York and all that sort of stuff, they were just starting to get into it themselves.
Yeah, 100%. And in Sydney, I mean, the first real cocktail bar that I kind of knew of was the Grand Pacific Blue Room, where all the kind of trendy people would go, and the celebrities and stuff. And they were the first places I saw that had like a real kind of cocktail program, before that was even a buzzword, So there was the International in Sydney, which was a great bar. And then there was obviously the Bayswater Brasserie, which wasn't really known for, I guess, mixology at that time. It was more a place you would go and have like a 3 martini lunch, or you would drink some champagne, or, it was a very creative space. They had a lot of like people from the art world, advertising, fashion, politicians, and a lot of industry would come there and, and eat and drink. So before I came along, it was a very popular place, but it wasn't really known as a place where you would come and get, a finely mixed drink. You know, you get a great martini or a great Manhattan, and you know, like I said, you crack a bottle of champagne, have some oysters, and that was it. It was kind of like a power lunch place, you know.
Mm-hmm. How'd you get the gig there? How'd you make the transition from sort of kicking it off and starting off in bartending to taking over Bayswater?
You know what? I've always been a big believer in progression and trying to seek out places that are a little bit better than the last.
Mm-hmm.
So each place I worked was just a little significantly better than the last one. So I kind of found myself just working my way up and just identifying different bars that I thought would be good to work at. And, you know, I was like the Grand Pacific Blue Room was like a dream job. I was like, I thought people had to die to get a job there, you know? So, but you know, the Bartender Magazine thing definitely helped because it definitely put my name out there and people knew that. And like I said, I was, I guess, very knowledgeable. But going into the Blue Room was a bit of trial by fire. You know, these guys really knew their stuff and they were fast and efficient and just great bartenders, you know, and that's where I really kind of felt like my craft was starting to develop, you know, after working there. And then went on to the middle bar. And then after that, I don't know, by then I was fairly well known in the traps around Sydney and Australia. So going into Bayswater, you know, I think I don't remember exactly what happened, but I believe that like just a friend of a friend probably just introduced me to Nigel, the owner. And I think their head bartender, Brian, I think was kind of leaving and they were just like, hey, do you want to come on board? And there was not a position there where I was just like, I wasn't like a creative director or a mixologist or I was just bartending there, you know, and like, you know, I wasn't kind of necessarily hired as a head, whatever, you know, I was just like, come on in and we'll just see where it goes. And I guess it just evolved into somewhere, you know, really, really special, you know, that I think not only created a lot of great careers in the industry, but it was one of the first places I ever saw that put a lot of focus on training,
Mm-hmm.
You know, systems. You know, I mean, it was a shit show too. You know, don't be shy. We were probably taking way too many, you know, drinks and drugs at that time. But it was just one of those places that had this kind of energy in there that was very palpable. You know, and I think that I was very passionate and obsessed by making sure that our team were finely tuned and well trained and courteous, and you know, that hospitality was really the kind of backbone of our whole philosophy. You know, and that was the kind of place where I really kind of switch gears and went, you know, I want to create somewhere, you know, really special, you know, that kind of would have its own legacy, I guess, you know. So, you know, and we had this amazing back bar that was, you know, the envy of most of the bars in the country. And it was just, you know, like everything was very thoughtful there. You know, the way we did things was very curated and everything was by design. You know, we didn't really kind of, you know, try to wing it or try to fluke it or, you know, but you know, we definitely had a philosophy of not cutting any corners and really kind of had this kind of pursuit of excellence. I guess that it kind of that kind of mantra has informed everything I do since then. You know, that was the kind of the bar where I really went, okay, this is something really special that we should, you know, nurture and develop and, you know, bring in young talent and really kind of, you know, show them the way. And that's kind of blossomed careers of like Charlie Ansbury and many others, you know, that have really kind of taken that foundation, I guess, and run with it.
And with like that's the early 2000s, mid 2000s, like how have you seen the industry change? Obviously it has, but like obviously changed from those mantras and those methodologies. The mission statement you had at Bayswater is now sort of spread, as you were saying, like Charlie's over with Proof, and you've traveled over the world and consulted everywhere as well. Do you think that there's still a lot of work to be done in that sort of mantra of getting the youngsters in, training them up, making a special place instead of worrying about all the, I suppose, superficial stuff of the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question, Shawn. You know, I think that, you know, back in those days, it was much more commonplace to stay in one bar for quite a long time. You know, I think that's definitely one big change over the last kind of decade is people bouncing around a lot more, which has its benefits as well. But I think that it says something about someone's character to stay in somewhere for a long time and really kind of create their own, you know, environment that is, like I said, something that they can nurture themselves and bring in talent and really nurture that talent there. So that doesn't happen as much, it is unfortunate. I won't lie. I think it's, you know, I think there's a very much a mentality of the grass is always greener. And, you know, I think social media has definitely paved the way for that, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like this kind of quick meteoric rise to success, or at least perception of success, amongst a lot of people. So, I do wish, and I do encourage actually people to be a bit more patient.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously if a job sucks, but if you can push through and create something within a venue, I think that's something to be admired. I wish we would see a bit more of that. You see guys like Morgenthaler and was it Clyde Common for like 14 years or something. And you've got like people that are in bar jobs. Lenny is one of our was my bar manager at the Bayswater Brasserie. He's been at the Icebergs now for I think probably at least a decade.
Yeah.
And he's probably in his mid to late 40s by now, and it's like that's admirable to me. I think it says something about your character, and then you can really create something lasting. I think you can create a culture, and I think that's really hard these days when people are coming and going. Creating a culture is much more difficult, but it's so important to the kind of especially the internal success, the internal operations of a bar, to have that culture be positive and inspiring, and all that stuff is really important. And I do think it's overlooked in a lot of ways.
Yeah, my right-hand guy right now is 23 years old. He just turned 23 last year. Amazing kid, like really, really talented. And but he always wants to be creative. He always wants to be like, go, create new things. I'm like, just chill, bud. Like, it's the first quarter of the year. Just relax. Like, we'll figure out some stuff with World Class. Like, just be patient. He's like, oh, but we should do this and we should do that. I'm like, dude, we're still partially restricted and locked down here. Like, we can't do much. Let's just get through it. Right. He's like, okay. And you see him take a breath, and he's slightly frustrated. And then he's like, he has a busy Friday. He's like, okay, I'm fine now. I'm like, you just need a busy day. That's all it is. So you've seen Australia's bar scene grow. What was the next move after Bayswater and everything, Australian Bartender Magazine, all that sort of stuff? What was the next career move for yourself?
I'd always had it, obviously, most people want to open their own bars and so forth. And I did and still do have, those aspirations as well. But at that time, I wasn't obviously financially ready. And I just, I love to travel. And I just felt like there wasn't much left for me to do in Sydney at that time, unless I was going to go and open a bar, which I wasn't necessarily mentally or financially ready for, So, I'd done a year in London around the early 2000s as well. And I just, the city didn't gel with me like I was hoping. As much as I love London, I love visiting London, but and maybe it was just a time and place that it just didn't work out. But I came back, and then, the dream was always like, New York was always that kind of like, seemed like that pinnacle, the kind of the Mount Olympus of the bar world that I kind of felt like I had to at least be there to spread my wings and to grow, and I think that, I've always been a student of the industry, and I felt like that was the place to go to kind of learn, and all these kind of great industry legends and identities that you kind of read about all the time and so forth were based there, and I wanted to be around that energy and around these kind of people that I could learn and grow from and be part of that scene. And until that time, no one was really going to New York from Australia. I think Sammy Ross was probably the one that paved the way. I'm not sure when I think he arrived there like 2004 or 5, I think. And yeah, there wasn't just, most people would go to London because it was easier for us Australians to get a visa and all that. So New York just seemed a bit more difficult. And yeah, that was just like high on the list. And I was like, I didn't really know anybody there, and I was like, let's just go and see. Let's just go and see what happens, and just make a go of it. So I just kind of packed up and, spent a few months organizing and just, got myself together and just kind of started making my way from the West Coast over about a 2 to 3 month period of kind of just on vacation, with the intention to kind of get to New York and see what happens.
What year was that?
2006.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you were in North America that long, about the same amount of time as I have been.
Yep. I've been here almost 16 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And so once you got to New York, what was the direction when you got to New York? Did you have a plan?
I didn't really. No, I just, I remember one of the first things I did was I went out and bought this bar guide from like the bookstore, and I just read through it and just started circling bars and seeing which bars I liked and which ones seemed good. And I was just printing up like a cover letter and just going around, just dropping under doors, and, didn't really get any callbacks and stuff, all that stuff about New York being pretty cutthroat and they want New York experience was kind of true. I was just like, shit, man, this is a bit demoralizing, and I was kind of running out of money, and I was just like, shit, it's just, what have I done? And a lot of, anxiety about, is this going to work out at all? So yeah, I ended up landing a job at Public within a few weeks through an Australian connection, actually, which actually just went out well. So I worked with Avrico there for a few years, and then kind of helped build up that bar program. That place had a Michelin star. They did have a bar program, it was solid, but I also came in fairly quietly. I didn't kind of try to come in guns blazing, and no one had really known what I'd done in Australia, and that was fine. And I wasn't there to preach that, but I knew that I had my chops by then, but I needed to get some New York experience, and learn. I had so much to learn, at that stage, and again, each bar I went to, I just wanted it to be progressively a little bit better and better, and that's kind of, I had that same philosophy with New York, and then I just started seeking out specific bars, whether it was Pega Club, worked there for a year with Audrey. Then I got brought back into the Avrico family with Saxon and Parole, and we opened the Daily, which was a great little bar. And then, I went to work with the kind of famous chef Alex Stupak, who was doing very kind of progressive, modern Mexican, which I learned a lot from him, and I've learned a lot over the years from chefs. Been very, very inspired by them, and love to cook. And so each bar was just progressively a little bit better and better, and just constantly learning and soaking in and just learning off these great people that I'd kind of admired for so long.
What were the biggest differences you found between Australia's cocktail culture and New York? Because I found when I came to North America, like stick drinks were just like in Brisbane, stick drinks were just like king. Your Caprioshkas, your Caprianas, fucking mojitos were muddled, and gin tonics were muddled, and vodka lime and sodas were muddled. What was the big difference for you that stood out when it came to coming from Australia and to go into New York?
I think that, in New York, I think as a city, it's made up of so many immigrants, and people are so like well traveled that I think there was definitely very much a global perspective, I think, to things. That I kind of found fairly inspiring, that there was just this massive, massive melting pot of like cultures there, which can definitely inform and inspire different cocktail movements in and of itself. So I found people who were fairly discerning, in New York mostly. I found that maybe that travel from them and their different backgrounds kind of brought its own kind of energy to the bars. I found that was one thing. In terms of drinks themselves, classic cocktails were way bigger than I'd ever encountered in Australia. Like that was a huge thing, where drinks in Australia were always somewhat like progressive and very fresh, and like, a lot of Asian influence in their ingredients. Not to say that wasn't happening in New York, but it was definitely very prominent in Australia. So a lot of classic drinks, and I think that people calling their brands as well in America, like they don't do back home. Back in Australia, it's like kind of vodka soda, and they don't really care what vodka they're getting. And but here it's all about the brand name. And that can be fairly overwhelming itself. But those are probably the big differences. There was definitely a fairly growing amount of professionalism coming to the fore with all these new kind of bars opening from probably 2005 on, which I think would really help to kind of shape the way the scene is right now.
How do you, as you were saying earlier, you said you're a student of the industry. Someone who's traveled as much as you have, written about the travels you've had, trained as many people as you have, experienced the things that you have. How do you keep your passion going? Like, how do you get up every morning and go, you know what, like where's that thirst for finding something new?
Excellent question. I think that, I really enjoy just learning stuff every day, so I'm constantly reading things about, whether it's well beyond recipes. I think my focus has shifted in the last couple of years. I read a lot of stuff about self-improvement, management, leadership, self-growth, things that I think that are not just important for me personally, but just that can help me within the industry and help me then teach some of those things onto others, because I think that, while recipes and all that is still important for me, and it's part of, I guess, what I do daily as well, I think that for me, that challenge of just constantly trying to be better drives a lot of stuff that I do, you know. So I've never been one to try to be the best or be number one, and never really chased after any awards or anything. It was more just like, how do I continue to be better? And I think that anything that comes from that, whether it's an award or whatever, is a bonus. You know, I don't need that as validation, but I think I love the idea of being better every day. So being curious, constantly reading, constantly asking questions. You know, I question everything we do. Every bar that I work in, I try and question everything we do every day and go, why are we doing this? Why is it done this way? Like, why do we carry this product? Why is this napkin this color? Like, why do we carry these olives? Like, so constantly looking at ways to explore that new ways to be better. So everything within that operation is thoughtful, you know, so everything's curated and by design, and things are there for a reason, you know, and we have a legitimate, thoughtful, passionate reason why we're doing things that we can, you know, we can share with the rest of the team, and then they can articulate that, you know, so everything's just a constant conversation, you know, and then that's amongst my staff as well. And, you know, guys, what are we doing? How can we be better? What do we want to learn more about? So we do a ton of training, you know, that kind of inspires me. And I just like teaching people, you know, I have a lot to say, and I have a lot to, you know, I've done a lot of, you know, I've done a lot of, like you said, a lot of traveling. And I think that I feel, you know, I really enjoy that side of it. You know, I like teaching people and trying to, you know, mentor and inspire the next generation of people to, you know, take on some of the lessons that I've learned. You know, some will work, some won't, you know, but it's up to everyone to figure out what those are and for themselves, and, you know, use that in the best way that they see fit, you know, or not.
Do you think that level of transparency and honesty, because it's something I live by, that level of transparency and honesty with your team breeds a sense of ownership? Because there's no, in the past, I know a lot of operators, managers, that sort of thing, keep their cards close to their chest and keep a sort of division in between relationships and stuff like that. Whereas I think these days, especially with the generation that we've got coming through the ranks, the younger generation coming through the ranks, that transparency and honesty and being absolutely honest with them straight away, no passive aggressive crap or anything like that, breeds a different style of employee or workmate.
I think so. I mean, I think that people appreciate that honesty and being direct. You know, it could come across in different ways sometimes. You know, I've been called a dick many times in my life, and I probably will be for a long time. But, you know, I've definitely worked on that a lot over the years, and trying to be more patient and kind and calm and all that kind of stuff. And I think that I definitely try to use those qualities, you know, or, you know, preach those qualities a lot more these days. Now that I'm kind of practicing them myself more than I have before. But I think people appreciate that honesty and directness. You know, I'm not, you know, I don't suffer fools lightly. I'm very, you know, direct with my team, and I don't play any favorites. I'm just, you know, I expect people to do the same with me, you know, so I need to be held accountable as well. And, you know, and I welcome that from my staff. And I think as a lot of them get to know me a lot more, they feel more comfortable questioning my methods or questioning anything, and that's great. And that's how it should be. There should be a dialogue. And I have zero ego when it comes to any drinks on the menu. I'm not attached to anything in the bar. You know, all I want is just to be better every day. And if that means changing recipes, changing this, changing the system, like, I'm all about it, you know. So that's why it's important to have those open discussions with your team, you know, because I think that's what helps breed that culture. And, you know, for me, I think that, you know, I'm tough on people, but I'm like I said, I'm very fair. I'm fair with everyone. I'm not a yeller or a screamer. You'll never hear me raise my voice. But it's all in the desire for us collectively just to be better, and that's where that kind of passion and sometimes directness and boldness comes from. Because it's like, you know, I just, you know, I hold the bar very high, and I just, you know, I kind of want people on board to get that, you know, to be on board, that really understand that level of excellence that I'm striving for, you know. And that doesn't even have to be in a high-end bar. You know, you can have 5-star service in a dive bar, you know what I mean? So yeah,
service is an application, doesn't really matter where it's from or how it's put across, as long as it's quality. Yeah, like a lot of people always ask me why I don't work the bar much anymore, and I'm like, I've got 2 amazing bartenders who do an epic job. I don't need to be behind the bar schmoozing people anymore. I have no ego about having to be the forefront and the figurehead for anything. and my lads are amazing. My whole team, floor and the bar, are just epic. So, but let's jump back a little bit to the awards and stuff, because I know that awards, and we both are on a lot of boards and judging panels and whatnot for the awards around the world. And for me, it's always been interesting about bar awards and stuff like that, because being in Victoria, that means a lot. Like, if something in Victoria, BC gets a nod somewhere, 9 times out of 10 it's going to make my quarter, in the way of like just free marketing. And you did quite well when you were at Dante for 5 years, and you were a beast. I remember like the amount of work that went into your pop-ups. I think the last time I saw you face to face was the pop-up in Vancouver in 2019. And so like the work that you put into Dante, I know that it ruined Negronis for you for life, but like, and I remember seeing some of the articles when that sort of first started coming back, that people thought, like, because it was a Manhattan institution, and like even changing the slightest little thing, people sometimes lose their mind. What was the, like, having that legacy brand, what was the sort of direction you were taking in that one when it came to Dante?
I guess, I like to go, I guess, look around the cities and see what's missing. That there wasn't really this aperitivo movement at all. And I feel like that these were drinks that I enjoyed drinking, and no one was really doing it. Like, sure, there were Negronis around, and you might see an Americano here and there, but there was no one really fully focused on that. And obviously, taking over an old Italian cafe kind of made that synergy a bit easier, or at least it made it make sense. So we didn't have any idea whether it was going to work or not. Like, a lot of these drinks can be quite polarizing, and they aren't for everybody. But I'm a huge believer in taking something simple and repackaging it maybe in a way that people haven't seen before. Whether that's Campari and orange juice, or a Negroni, or gin and tonic, or
vermouth on tap.
vermouth, yeah, anything like that. So how can we get people excited about these products that if we just were putting it in a normal glass or something, over a single piece of ice cube, like, they're not going to get that excited about it. So how can we come up with these, I guess, these rituals that would get people kind of curious and excited, about. So that was kind of the premise for some of that, and I never went into that project, or any project, to be honest, with any intention to win any awards. That's just not really on. It's not really how my brain functions, I guess. I don't look at it through that lens, So, and that may sound odd coming from someone that has climbed those mountains, and I guess I don't want that to come across as like arrogant, that now I'm kind of not bitching about the awards, but like I have strong opinions about these awards, in terms of their benefits and their downfalls. And I think that in a nutshell, too many people these days are using that as their focus or their benchmark for success.
And it should be a byproduct.
100%. So I'm a huge believer in, if you do great things, people will notice. You don't need to go beating your chest about it. Like, people are going to notice. And now more than ever, if you look at the awards over the last several years, that the amount of cities represented is broader than ever, which is awesome. Which means that shows that people are doing great things all over the world, and they're traveling and doing pop-ups and guest bartenderships and all that, and which is great. And all that helps the brand. I don't think that Dante would have climbed those heights if we hadn't done all these pop-ups around the world and got people excited about what we do back home. And so, gets them excited to visit the mothership when they do come to New York, that kind of thing. So there's many benefits to it, but I think that there's a laser focus on winning awards, and I find some of the kind of the way that some people go about it, kind of trying to solicit votes and all this stuff, I just find it a little gross, and I guess I won't lie in the fact that I think that I know how that game is played. And while I certainly, like I said, wasn't going after awards, I know what certain things I think can help, whether it's pop-ups or the way we curate our menu, or, but I think that, for me, it was just, again, it was all about just trying to create this place of incredible service. That was kind of, I think, the benchmark of what we did there. And that was that side of the business is something I'm definitely laser focused on and super proud of, and continue to work on as well. Just try to come up with new ideas to create better service and better service techniques, and all sorts of
engagements and all that sort of stuff.
little tricks and stuff, and little, whether it's coming up with different sign language on the floor, and like things that kind of that the guest doesn't necessarily see, but just make things just flow. So that's the kind of the things that I try to instill in people, and it's something that keeps me inspired for sure.
Yeah, that's the one thing, having the youngsters have been has definitely changed my, like, has refocused me and invigorated me into helping them achieve what they want to do. Like, they want to do some crazy stuff on the next menu. I'm like, okay, cool, we're going to do that. But like, you have to understand, this is going to be a lot of work on my part. They want to do AR engagement on the menu and all that sort of stuff. But so the last couple of years has been tough on the industry as a whole. When did you move to Miami?
I moved here about just over a year ago. I moved here in November, so I've been here just a year and change. So yeah, New York was in a pretty dark place at that time. It was coming into the depths of winter. There was no indoor dining at all, so people were kind of huddled on the sidewalks in makeshift tents, and it was a depressing place at the time, and it was sad to see it like that, because it was always a place of great energy and passion, and just a great place for bars and restaurants. And it was just going through a really dark period, and I was working with a friend, and that kind of phased out because they just couldn't afford to keep me on, and I totally get it. So these guys from Sweet Liberty, Dan and David are friends of mine, and obviously John, who passed a few years ago, was a dear friend. So they've been kind of courting me for a while, but I just said, listen, let's just wait and see. And then then they said, can we revisit this and let's talk? And Dan wanted me to come down here for like a year and a half, and I was like, no chance. I've got no desire to be in Miami. It just didn't appeal to me. I was just like, I'd always known it was just a place to go and party, and go there for 2-3 days, come back broken, and that was Miami. It's kind of like Las Vegas without the gambling, So it was just like, we come in here, get wasted, go to the beach, and then come home. So that was the Miami that I knew. So I just said, listen, I'll give you. We went back from 6 months, and I was like 2. So I said, well, I'll give you 2 months, and then I can come back intermittently and just check on things. But after 2 months, the project was a lot bigger than I thought, and I was like, there's no way I can get done what you need me to get done in 2 months. So that kind of started getting extended a little bit more, and then in the end, I was like, I'm actually quite enjoying it down here. And New York was still somewhat closed. They've been having good summers, and now winter is back fully, and it's doing well up there now. But but at that time, I was like, man, this is great. I've got a solid job. I've got sunshine. I'm exercising a lot, and it's good. And it was a new project, and it was a bar that I'd always loved. So that made it easier. And they were and have been great partners and mentors, and I think we've all helped each other grow in this time as well, which is awesome. So it's been great being down here.
How did you shift that mentality of because I feel like there's a lot of bartenders in Vegas that feel the same way when they first moved there too. Like, how do you move that mentality of like the party city that you used to visit for a couple of days broken and then head home to, oh no, I like it here, and I'm gonna settle down here? Because it is a big change, like going out every night and trying to have that electricity all the time. Because usually, when you travel, you have like 2 days in a city, and you try and do everything you can possibly do in that city because you don't know when you could go back again. Right. How'd you change that mentality?
I think I just realized the fact that I actually live here now. So it's like I'm not going to go out and party like every night, like as if I was on vacation, So I just settled into the fact that, I need to get settled here. So that means having a normal life, which is spending nights at home and chilling and getting on my bicycle and riding on the promenade and going to the gym and, going grocery shopping and, all this shit that you normally do is, as opposed to just going, well, I have to go to these 5 bars tonight because I'm only here for 3 days. So I'm like, which wasn't a hard thing, but I just had to change my just shift that. So which is fine, and it's been great. So, but yeah, it's definitely a different scene down here. It's it's not as sophisticated as somewhere like New York, which just has, like I said, a lot more people, a lot more travelers. But that said, Miami is improving a lot. There's a lot of restaurants coming from all around the country and around the world are kind of setting up shop here. Bartenders moving here. So all of that is helping, I think, really kind of invigorate the scene, here, which is exciting. And it's an exciting time to be down here because there is a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of wealth down here and a lot of, also a lot of things that I think are missing, so there's an opportunity that I want to help. I'd love to help try and grow the scene here over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, and kind of really create some special venues here of my own that kind of, have their own legacy, but also just, practice a lot of those things that we've been talking about today that I've kind of, that I instilled in Bayswater Brasserie, Saxon and Parole, Dante, all these places that, had a certain level of excellence to them that has kind of, like I said, informed my whole career. And I want to be able to do that here. Across several different sort of concepts. Yeah.
And as you get older, like you're mentoring a hell of a lot of the younger generation bartenders coming up, different markets, that sort of thing. So I think you were doing something in Toronto a few years ago as well. How do you stay focused on your own personal, being a mentoree? Do you have mentors still at your stage in your career that you can still lean on and chat to and drop text messages at 2:00 in the morning asking a question because you're stuck on something?
Fun, for sure, 100%. I kind of approached a few people about 2 years ago, kind of formally, to say, listen, how would you feel about mentoring me at certain times of the year when I maybe need some advice on, a new project, or, whether it's financial advice or just helping navigate certain things that maybe are out of my wheelhouse, or that I need probably some outside perspective on. So, people like, Laura Cullen or, Sean Finter have been big ones for me. And then even the guys down here, Dan and David, two of the main owners of Sweet Liberty, have been great mentors and have really kind of, helped me a lot with a lot of, business questions, and also just getting to understand especially the landscape down here, and how that works from, financial or legal standpoint, whether it's, when it comes to operating bars and stuff. So been working with them a lot on improving things that I don't know about myself, so that's been helpful. But yeah, I think and then obviously people like Dale, he was down here a couple of days ago. He's always been a real father figure for many of us, but we're very close, and so call him up every now and then. And then, I think it's important to have people that you can approach, because often people are scared to approach people, thinking they're either too busy and stuff. But you'd be surprised how much people are willing to give up their time, if you ask. And there's people that are very, very generous with that. Even people that are younger but have almost like a lifetime experience in a way. Like, even guys like Jack McGarry, at Dead Rabbit, is a very close friend of mine, and he's extremely smart, very insightful when it comes to the business. And so I often, ask people like him questions and stuff. So I think it's important to know that there are people out there that will go above and beyond to help you if you ask. I think that people, and listen, all they can do is say no, so which they really do, but I think that it's, you got to ask the question, because the benefits can be huge.
Yeah, I don't love it when people say, "Oh, I don't want to bother you because you're busy," and I'm like, dude, you're at the breaking point. You're about to have a mental break because you've been working too much. You should talk to me 4 weeks ago. Oh, I saw you on social media. You were super busy. I'm like, 15, 20 minutes to have a coffee is not a big deal. Half an hour to have a coffee is not a big deal out of my day.
Yeah.
So now that it's funny how you went from, I'm going to stay in Miami for 2 months, and now I want to stay here and create the culture for the next 5-10 years. What is your plan for the next 5 years? Obviously traveling is coming back. Have you done a lot of travel over the last couple of years, or you've been sort of focused on Sweet Liberty and that sort of thing?
I think the last 6 months I've traveled quite a lot, maybe 6 to 9 months. I've been back on the road again, doing some pop-ups and some brand trips and guest bartending slots and that kind of thing. So it's definitely picked up again. But I would love to, New York is still home in many ways, because I was there for 15 years, and I would like to do a project up there, or a couple of projects up there, and then do several projects down here. That would be, and kind of bounce back between the two, and then and that's not to say that I wouldn't like to chase opportunities in other cities and countries too, but I would love to do something in Australia. If for no other reason, then it would just get me home a bit more often than I currently do.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, we need to wait for this virus to kind of
fuck off,
play out, I guess. Yeah. And see what that means, or for where the industry is at that stage, because things are changing so much, and so, like I said, I'd be open to living anywhere, really. I think this whole virus has changed so many things, including that. So, I would love to, next 5 years, have something in Australia, something in New York, a few things in Miami, and that's kind of spend the year kind of bouncing between those, kind of, looking after the various venues and just creating a culture within those venues that can, inspire, people again, particularly younger staff that are coming through and want to make a career out of it, and know that can be a real, nursery of information for them, and culture, and learn how to really become the best kind of hospitalians they can,
Do you have a perfect venue in your head? Like when you're saying like you want to open up a space in Australia, New York and Miami, like obviously just through this conversation, we've seen that you're constantly evolving and building on your knowledge. Like, do you have something in your head that's like a concept that you're like, you know what, this is exactly what I want to do? Would you do it? I'm trying to phrase this the right way. Would you do it specifically for the city you're moving to? Or is there something in your head that is like the epitome of Naren Young in a venue?
It's a good question. I think it may be a little bit of both. I think, like I said, I like to look for opportunities that don't exist somewhere, and see what that city or even that neighborhood within that city potentially needs, or what I think they need anyway. That's, and, I have things in my head that I'm passionate about. I think I'll always be passionate about aperitivos and that kind of side of things. I'd love to do a pizza concept, with a great bar program. I have an idea on a supper club kind of idea. I have, like an Asian food concept idea. There's a lot of different things which I think could work in various cities. I think that, so any concepts I do now, I'm trying to work on ones that I think can scale, and I think could easily fit into the fabric of other cities. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to go focus more towards that. And for most of the venues now, I think the older I get too, I think I want bar programs that are a bit more simple. It's a bit more, kind of having a bar program like Dante. I mean, we had 70 cocktails on the menu there. You know what I mean? And for anyone that's ever been to Dante, it's tiny. You know what I mean? It's like 65 seats, including the bar. Behind the bar, you can barely walk behind someone. It's so tight. It's only got 2 stations in it, and we're pumping. We had like 8 different cocktail menus. So 70 drinks that were available all the time. For every second that we're open, we could make those 70 drinks. So that gets tiring. And it gets exhausting, and to have that level of excellence. And like I said, I didn't need to win world's best bar to go, okay, now I can relax and now I can get back. It wasn't like that at all. It was just more like, fuck, that was hard work, and it is hard work, and it's the constant upkeep and the constant training and oversight, and you've just got to live and breathe it like non-stop if you want to have a bar of that caliber. You just have to. So that's not to say that any other bar I do won't have those same kind of characteristics in terms of service and attention to detail that I'm passionate about and maniacal about, but you can do that in a much more simple format, whether that's the size of the menu or the service style, could be different in terms of like, the service model, I guess, and staffing models, because particularly in this day and age where it's hard to find staff. So all those things need to be in consideration. The type of food you serve, depending on how many chefs can you afford, how big is your kitchen. So all those things are definitely informing me going forward in terms of not having to have something so complicated. So having a menu that has 6 or 8 drinks on there, and they're just classics, and they're really well, and they're just perfectly made. Things like that are kind of where my head is going. Just maybe also for my own sanity, just because it's just hard, and it's hard on the staff, and it's there's extra prep hours and prep money you have to spend. So it's just, I think, to have something that's a bit more focused on excellence, but done in a much more simple format.
Yeah, we've got 50 cocktails on our menu.
Right.
It's a lot.
I just think people just want things that are delicious. I just think that that word is so underrated, and I just think it's like, when did we? I think it was Ryan McGarry once years ago just said to me, when did we stop describing things as delicious? Like everything has to be so complicated now. It's like, I just want a delicious margarita or a
Mhm.
delicious Manhattan or a delicious Tom Collins, and like, there's nothing wrong with that, you know.
No.
And I think that there's this kind of like desire to be weird and wonderful, and I think a lot of bartenders have forgotten the importance of having things that are just simple but perfect,
Mhm.
you know, because you don't find many bars that make perfect Manhattans and perfect sidecars and perfect Tom Collinses, drinks that are so important in the canon of, you know, of our kind of industry. But I kind of thought I was maybe boring, or,
Mhm.
you know, they're not going to win any awards because they've got this menu of drinks that just everybody knows, you know, like,
Yeah.
it's kind of not the point. So, you know, I think without that foundation, it's really easy to get lost in this kind of, you know, perfunctory world of just
Crazy for the sake of crazy.
kind of, yeah, you know. So I just think that I try to instill that getting back to basics a little bit, and I think that going forward, that's probably where I'd like to focus more of
Mhm.
my attention with bar programs. Is okay, let's just do the simple things, but let's just do them perfectly,
Mhm.
you know, and let's just concentrate on that, you know, because I think there's a lot of nobility in that,
Mhm.
you know, and
Oh, 100%.
that nobility is forgotten in terms of chasing awards and serving things in, you know, that are in birds you know, glass shoes and all this kind of, you know, just for the sake of, I don't know, for social media, or, you know, like I said, to get people's attention. And listen, it works for some bars. It works, and that's totally fine. And I'm not dissing any bars that do that. But
I do it. I've got a bird glass on my menu. But
nothing wrong with that.
it's a 3-touch cocktail. We
Nothing.
wanted to do as like a big value add. But no, I agree. There needs to be a certain level of
Well, it's got to make sense. You know,
yeah.
like, for me to do that at Dante, it wouldn't have made sense.
Mhm.
Like, I would have found that would have gone against what we were actually trying to promote, which is this old classic Italian, or sorry, European inspired, you know, kind of um, relaxed, kind of convivial,
Mhm.
down to earth cafe. You know, and I just, so for me to serve something with dry ice or with, like, you know, out of a, you know, a glass shoe, just would have just seemed a bit contrived
Mhm.
for us. But again, I'm not dissing any bars that do that, and then, like, because it just has to make sense for you. You know,
Mhm.
it works in some bars and it gets attention, and, you know, there's bars that, you know, you know, that are in the top 10 bars in the world now that have all that stuff, and that's great because it probably works for them. You know,
Yeah. And
but that's what
I have
people expect.
Negronis on tap as well. So like we try and do the whole span. Like if you want to come in for a Negroni real quick for happy hour, knock yourself out.
Right.
Four really great cocktails on tap. And then we just got some crazy ostentatious stuff because I like the fancy shit. So as we go forward, you seem to have a nice focus and a good goal in mind. Um, what do you see from an industry standpoint? Like we've touched on it a little bit with simplicity and stuff. Do you feel like this is a big reset for our industry, a big opportunity for our industry to become better across the board in all the conversations we've had over the last 2 years, whether it be diversity hires and so on and so forth? Do you think there's an opportunity to reset the whole industry as it is right now?
I hope so. You know, I think that it's probably never been a better time or more appropriate time, I think, in history to kind of look internally, you
Hmm.
know, as either personally or just as an industry as well, and just go, what can we do to be better? And if that includes, you know, a more diverse workforce, 100%. You know, like if it's um, different pay structures and health insurance,
Hmm.
and looking after our staff, and, you know, taking more of an interest in their mental well-being. You know, I think all of these things are not only important physically and so forth, but I just think, you know, on a macro level, just like helping people, you know, in more ways than just providing, you know, a job. You know,
Hmm.
how can we help people grow and, you know, um, be mentally sound and make sure that they're okay, and really kind of, I guess, nurture a bit more than maybe we have in the past. So yeah, I think there's a great opportunity right now for business owners and that kind of thing to really kind of, like I said, look internally and figure out, like, what can I do more? What can I do more of for
Hmm.
my staff to make them more comfortable, more sound, more appreciated, more inspired. So all those things. That's why I try and do a lot of reading on this kind of stuff now, and just to try and see what tools are out there that I can use to kind of do that. But yeah, I think that, and then yeah, from a actual practical standpoint, I think that, you know, if we can get back to basics, I think is always a nice one. But I think it's not everyone has that same mentality. Some people want to do some crazy shit, and that's totally fine. You know, but this is just me getting older, and I just don't have I don't think I have the mental capacity or the bandwidth, or even the physical attributes that I need to perform at that level of craziness. You know, so
yeah.
To keep things more simple, I think will just make life, you know, more manageable.
It's fair. So I don't want to keep you much longer because we have been chatting for a while. For everybody who's listening right now, where can they find you? Obviously, Sweet Liberty in Miami. What about social media?
Social media, yeah, I'm on Instagram at Fork and Shaker. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not really in the Twitterverse or the Facebookverse very much. You know, I'm on Instagram a bit. Most of it's mostly work related. You know, I'm pretty much, you know, kind of trying to help promote Sweet Liberty as much as I can, and you know, enjoying myself here, and looking forward to the next few years of, like I said, trying to develop some concepts that would work in Miami and further afield. You know, so that's the short-term goal for now, and trying to do everything I can to work towards those.
Awesome. Well, as soon as we can start traveling again, I'd love to do a Sweet Liberty pop-up here in Canada.
100%.
Done. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. It was an absolute pleasure. That was a fantastic hour, which went by really, really quickly.
Thanks, Shawn. Appreciate you, buddy.
Cheers, buddy. I'll chat to you really soon.